Good morning, everybody. Now, yesterday I was at the big farmers' protest in London, and as always on these rallies and protests against what the government is doing, especially when the government is acting against the people, I had a great time despite what's happening in the country because I'm there with tens of thousands of people, all of like mind, good people, decent people who just want to get on and make their living and go about their business and bring up their families in England, or in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, of course, the four nations of the United Kingdom. And we don't want the government to interfere unduly in our lives. And that's just what ordinary people want. We just want to get on with our lives. So the people who were at the protest were fantastic. And, I met lots of people who came and said hello to me, recognized me from being on social media and television sometimes. And it was a great time. Did a few interviews with a few people about what's going on, especially the war on farmers. And it is a war on farmers which is being perpetrated by the Starmer regime. But it's not just here in the UK. You see different attacks on farmers with different mechanisms in different countries. We've seen in the Netherlands, they're putting on a nitrogen tax, or they tried. You'd see in Ireland, they said they're going to kill, cull, same thing basically, 250,000 cows and so on. You see in the United States, Bill Gates is buying up huge swathes of farmland, and then what's being grown on that farmland, probably nothing that's nutritious or good or natural for us to consume. So the people there were fantastic and they went in good faith. And I had a great time, I must admit. I was there for a couple of hours. Sadly for me, I was in a place where it was difficult to hear. There were so many people and it was so crammed. It was very hard to get close to the stage and hear what was being said on the stage. I think if you were in the back half of the crowd, you're too far away to hear anything clearly, because there were so many people there that the stage was up just a little bit north of Downing Street and the crowd went all the way back to Parliament Square. So a huge number of people there, more than they expected to turn up, because it was a Tuesday, a work day, and they just had a lot of people. I was actually behind the stage, so I got there, I walked up the pavement, and I was trying to get into front of the stage, but going round from the behind in the front. That maybe doesn't make sense there, but I was sort of further north than the stage, but I couldn't get to a position in front of the stage, so I was behind the stage, if you like, and then it was still fairly hard to hear what was being said, but I still had a great time anyway, because of the people who were there and the camaraderie. But reflecting on this, I'm a little bit in two minds about the protest, not the people protesting, but the organisation and what was presented to people on the stage. And yet there was a lot of talk about the issues and so on, the big one being the inheritance tax grab. But the people on the stage were all part of the Uniparty, who are just as much of a problem in many ways as the Starmer regime. So, of course, the headliner they had was Camille Badenoch, the head of the fake Conservative Party. And when there were lockdowns and injections being going on, she advocated for pregnant women to be injected with experimental mRNA. And it looks to me like what's being set up here is that, well, let's go back in time a little bit. Obviously, before the general election this year in 2024, Labour was set up to win. Keir Starmer was set up to be the Prime Minister. And for a year or more beforehand, the fake Conservatives were just slaughtered in the mainstream media. And they deserved it because they were absolutely dreadful. So people were just so disgusted with the fake Conservatives that they abandoned them en masse. Labour didn't get any more votes, but they got in because they got the highest number of votes by far in the general election in 2024. But it seems what's being set up now is the opposite. Already, in record time, the Starmer regime, the Labour, have only been in power for less than 5 months, and people are already absolutely disgusted with them. Even their own supporters are abandoning them because they're not doing anything for the labouring man. I mean, they're attacking workers, they're attacking businesses, they're attacking farms, they're attacking old people by taking away their winter fuel allowance, and people who, they believe, like useful idiots, and they are, but they believe that Labour are morally good. They're not, but some people do genuinely believe that because they think that, oh, well, we're going to give money to the old people, we're going to give money to, migrants. I totally disagree with that, by the way, but, some people do believe that's good. But even they are abandoning the Labour Party because they've been so disgusting in what they're doing, and they're deliberately demolishing the economy at the moment, and with the budget that happened at the end of October. So already they are being set up to fail in the next election. But I see what's happening here is that there is a very subtle, let's call it, behavioural, psychological technique, if you like. They're trying to guide people back to voting Tory again, as though they're going to be the solution for all the dreadful things that Labour are doing at the moment. Just like before the election this year, Labour were talked up as the solution to the fake Conservatives. Now it's swinging back the other way. The fake Conservatives have got a new leader, Camille Badenoch. I know her. She's a very nice person. I sat next to her on the London Assembly, but I don't agree with many of the things that she says. And I certainly don't see the fake Conservatives as being any kind of answer to the dreadful things that the Starmer regime, the Labour government, is doing at the moment. But this seems to be what is being set up for people. And people are being guided and herded back to supporting the fake Conservatives who abandoned them in the 2024 election. So she's up there on the stage talking about how she supports farmers, how she's going to end and remove these extra taxes that Labour have put on farmers for inheritance tax and so on. And she's there with this other woman, I've never heard of her before actually, but some people have, called Emily Sheffield. Now, apparently, she is the sister of Samantha Cameron, who was married to David Cameron. So she's David Cameron's sister-in-law. And she, during the lockdowns, advocated for people in London to be punished if they hadn't had a vaccination. So she's no good either. But she's up there on the stage advocating for farmers, saying all the right things about this particular issue. No, I agree with them on this particular issue. This inheritance tax grab on farmers is totally wrong and wicked. The Heritage Party policy is to scrap inheritance tax completely. I mean, already, whatever is there already doesn't bring in a huge amount of money to the Exchequer. It's about £8 billion a year. That sounds a lot, but the foreign aid budget is £14 billion a year. So, if you scrap inheritance tax, all you have to do to balance that is scrap foreign aid. You'll actually get more money back from scrapping foreign aid, if you like, than continuing with inheritance tax. So what Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, I can't believe that those two words are in the same sentence, but there you go. What she is doing is she's putting this agricultural property relief on land. Agricultural land is being scrapped, as we know, for estates over £1 million. And the last year we have figures for, which is 2021, 2022, agricultural property relief was claimed by 1,730 businesses. Farms, of course, farms, businesses attached to the farms, they all register on Companies House as businesses, but 1,730 farms a year, essentially, would be affected by this, or will be affected by this come April when this new inheritance tax grab comes in. And so you're going to have about 1,730 farms will have to sell some of their land or liquidate their business in order to pay inheritance tax when a farmer dies and wants to pass it on to their children. This is absolutely wicked, because it is destroying the inheritance of families which can be passed down from generation to generation. They want to disrupt that and take the land for themselves. Eventually, if one generation you take 20% of their land or something, and next generation you take another 20% of the land, as they continually have to sell off more bits of their agricultural land to pay inheritance tax generation after generation, and after a few generations, if this continues, it'll all be gone. But even worse than that are the farms that will have to sell the farm basically to pay it, because this is not liquid assets. Sorry, that my grammar's not very good. They are not liquid assets. Agricultural land is not a liquid asset. It is a fixed asset. So you can't just take it out of the bank account and go, okay, here's a few currency units and pay it. You have to sell it off in order to pay your inheritance tax bill. So that's why it's so destructive. But more than that, 1,730 farms claim agricultural property relief. There are 4,170 businesses that claimed business property relief in the same year that we have the data for, the last year, 2021, 2022. So we've got about 3 times as many businesses will be affected as farms. And this doesn't get mentioned much because all the attention has been on farms, quite rightly, because we need farmers because they produce food for us. And, we cannot attack farmers. No one in their right mind would attack farmers and do this. But they're not in their right mind because this is a deliberate attack, act of economic demolition. But businesses, small family businesses, are going to be affected at an even higher rate than farms. 3 times as many businesses as farms. 2.5 times as many businesses as farms will be affected by this as well, because they're not just ending agricultural property relief, they're ending business property relief as well. So if you own a small business, say you own a shop, the building's worth £500,000, you've got a certain amount of profit, so that adds more value to the business. You've got stock, which adds more value to the business. So say you have a business that's worth £2 or £3 million, a small family business, you want to pass it on to your children when you die. Well, you're going to have to sell the business in order to pay the inheritance tax on that business, which will accrue under the new rules, because small family businesses are in the same boat as small family farms as well, which is why this is doubly destructive. It's going to destroy nearly 2,000 farms a year, and it's going to destroy another 4,000 or so, 4,000 plus businesses every year. Again, destroying small businesses, which is what big business wants. The people who are running Agenda 2030, the World Economic Forum, they're in cahoots with all the big banks and so on. They want to destroy small businesses because they want greater market share for themselves, and they want to plunder and pillage the assets of small businesses and farms when they come up for sale, when they've been destroyed by this new inheritance tax grab that Rachel Reeves, the Starmer regime, the Labour government in the UK are putting on farms and small businesses to destroy them. The lie that is coming from Rachel Reeves and the government is that they need this money to pay for the NHS. So that is a complete load of bunkum, because even the farming part of this, the inheritance tax on agricultural land, is going to raise something between 500 and 550 million pounds a year. So £500 million a year. Whereas they've pledged £3 billion a year in perpetuity for weapons to go to Ukraine. they're spending £6 billion a year on migrant hotels. Now, that comes out of the foreign aid budget, which in total is about 14 billion. So there's 6 billion on migrant hotels, another 8 billion a year going out the door for development in foreign countries. And a lot of that means net zero things, wind farms and solar panels, in Argentina and Pakistan. So we're destroying British farms in order to put up wind turbines in Pakistan. This is kind of essentially what they're doing. And the money which is going to be raised from destroying 2,000 farms a year is tiny compared to the foreign aid budget and the Ukraine budget. And, even worse than that is the whole net zero budget, which, is directly going to cost the country, the government paying for it will directly cost about £10 billion in government funding for net zero projects, but it's going to cost the nation as a whole lot more in terms of loss of economy and more expensive energy and so on, as they destroy our carbon-based energy infrastructure and try to replace it with something that doesn't produce any energy when the wind stops blowing and the sun stops shining. And then we become more and more dependent on importing electricity from France and the Netherlands and importing gas from Norway. What happens if France decides, well, we need our electricity for ourselves, we're not going to give any to you anymore? We're stuffed. But this will be a direct result of Labour and the fake Conservatives before, which pursued net zero just as much as the Labour government doing. And the other person on the stage yesterday I didn't mention was Ed Davey, who was the leader of the Lib Dems, who is just as much another net zero nut job who wants to replace carbon-based energy with wind and solar. So these people are actually causing lots of trouble for a whole economy, but especially for farmers. So they're up there saying, we don't agree with what Labour's doing with inheritance tax. Okay, fair enough. But if you support net zero, that is also equally pernicious in destroying the way of life for farmers, because it makes all their costs more expensive. And then they're told, oh, you can't produce food here anymore. You have to rewild your land. And you can't, use this and that. And, there's all these regulations about what they have to do to be green and meet net zero targets. And agriculture is firmly in the crosshairs of everybody who supports net zero. Ultimately, you see these dreadful reports like the Sainsbury's report on the future of food that says in the future they don't want meat, they don't want cows, they don't want dairy herds, they don't want sheep. They want to get rid of them all and grow frankenfood, lab-grown meats grown by bacteria in, some cellar in, dungeon somewhere. I don't know. That's what they want to be the future. And the World Economic Forum, of course, we know has said in the future meat will be a rare treat, not a staple like it is today. So they essentially would like us to get us eating like soy nutrition or whatever they call it, frankenfoods, which are not going to be particularly good for our health and well-being and strength. That's the future that they want. And all of the Uniparty, fake Conservative, Labour, Lib Dem, Green are on board with that agenda. So the fact that this farmers' rally is saying a good thing about one aspect of the war on farms has all these people who support most of the rest of the agenda, Tories, Lib Dem people. You got Richard Tice was around in the crowd, and of course he advocated for care home workers to have jabs, otherwise, they shouldn't be allowed to work. He said that on his show back in April 2021. Being interviewed with David Bull. It's all there for everybody to see. The clips very, very widely distributed. You got all these people around. And Farage turned up in a tractor. I saw that. It just looked like a clown show. He didn't get on the stage. But, you know, you got the uniparty and the fake opposition there. Jeremy Clarkson. No, I like Jeremy Clarkson, but he did a really bad job when he was interviewed by the BBC. He let them walk all over him. He couldn't give a straight answer as to why that there shouldn't be this inheritance tax to pay for the NHS, which is the line the government's coming out with. He just said, oh, the BBC. Yeah, we know the BBC's bad, but you've got to answer the question, you know, in an intelligent way and rebut what they're saying. Otherwise, it looks like they've got the upper hand. And, you know, I know a lot of people like Jeremy Clarkson, but when they asked him about, you know, well, why shouldn't we take this money from farmers to pay for the NHS? The correct answer is it's only going to raise £500 million. The NHS budget is £200 billion. It's a black hole of money. You could easily save £500 million in the NHS by firing all their diversity officers, let alone all the rest of the waste of money that the Labour government is doing on the Ukraine war, foreign aid, migrant hotels, HS2 and net zero, as I've mentioned before. That's the answer that would immediately rebut them in terms of the figures, because they're not going to raise hardly any money by doing this. And the lie which is being pushed and is gaining some traction is that they need this money, and farmers or landowners are just greedy rich people who don't want to pay their fair share. This is the line, the narrative that they're pushing. I have to say, although I like Jeremy Clarkson, he didn't do a good job in rebutting that line when he was interviewed by the BBC. So that adds strength to their narrative, because you need people to be able to rebut what they're saying in real time. So sadly, you know, I have to say, I loved the march. I loved the rally, meeting people and talking to people. A lot of the same people were there. You know, some of the people who were on the freedom rallies as well back in 2020 to 2022. But it looks like the people that they had leading the revolt, if you like, were all part of the establishment. And it's just a Punch and Judy show where Punch and Judy are being pulled by the same puppeteer, and the same puppeteer is getting them to, you know, have arguments with each other. But the show is just a puppet show, and it goes on. We need real opposition to this. And the Heritage Party is the real opposition. You know, we've had all of these things in our manifesto from the very beginning when we launched, that we support farmers, regenerative farming. That's a new section, actually. But we support, you know, British agriculture, properly subsidising our farmers to make food here, to grow food here, produce food here. We will totally get rid of everything in the net zero agenda, to the point of repealing the Climate Change Act 2008, which means that there will be no net zero targets. There won't, with us, with the Heritage Party, there will not be any reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, because we don't need them, because carbon dioxide is not a harmful gas that is destroying the planet, which is the lie coming from all the climate alarmists. So we will get rid of that act, which is what is in law forcing everybody to reduce their use of carbon-based energy, which is absolutely fine, and is driving up energy prices. We will come out of the Paris Climate Agreement, and we will come out of any international agreements which tie us to anything in Agenda 2030 and the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We'll come out of the whole agenda and set this country free from the shackles of net zero and climate alarmism once and for all. That's in our manifesto. We're the only party that has a specific sentence or policy against Agenda 2030. So of course those things have been in our manifesto since the very beginning. So we are the real opposition in politics to this agenda. And of course we're against inheritance tax. We would abolish inheritance tax because it hammers the middle classes. The ultra rich, you know, who are passing on estates of 20 million or more, don't pay inheritance tax because they They move all of their liquid assets to the Virgin Islands or Singapore or somewhere where the British government can't get its hands on it. And they put their fixed assets like land and homes and plants and machinery and stock, they put them in trust for their children so that they can inherit a business or a farm with lots of land without paying inheritance tax. That's how they do it. But it's very hard for families with assets of under that amount to do that because it's such a hassle to do that. And there are obviously ties to your assets and your money. If you do that, they have to be in trust for at least 7 years. You can't take them out. You can't do with them as you'd like to do. You're not free to touch them, sell them, whatever. So there are costs and opportunity costs to doing that. But the ultra rich don't pay inheritance tax. It only hammers small businesses and families who've got a breadwinner who's worked really, really hard all their life to build up a small amount of assets in the sense of small compared to the ultra rich, maybe built up 1 million, 2 million, 5 million pounds of assets they want to pass on to their children. It's hard for them to arrange that, to put that in trust, but the ultra rich don't pay it. That's why inheritance tax is so unfair, because the people who the people they say should pay it, the ultra rich, they don't pay it. So it needs to be scrapped because it doesn't bring in a huge amount of money anyway in comparison to the amount that the government is pouring down the drain on all these other things. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on the whole situation. The rally yesterday, the inheritance tax grab, the attack on farmers, the attack on businesses, and the fake opposition, which is now being promoted and being pushed forward as the saviours. But they're not the real saviours. They're just part of the same uniparty. So we need to be aware of that and take direct action, perhaps, in whatever way that is. Peacefully, of course. I do not condone any violence or any criminal damage, but peaceful direct action, whatever that is, whatever form that may take, may come along sometime soon. But it won't be led by any of these people in the uniparty who just get people to turn up and shout at Downing Street and then go home again, and that's it. So there we go. My thoughts. This will be to be continued because this isn't over yet. Thanks for listening, everyone, and God bless you all.